Hey, book lovers. Welcome to While I Read. I'm Katie Dodrell, and today I'm going to continue talking about the books that I read this summer. I haven't done a great job of keeping you updated on everything that I'm reading this summer. I'm trying to do better with that. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about 13 books that I read from the middle of June through the end of July. I realize 13 is a bad luck number, but hopefully it'll be lucky for this video. So, first, I want to talk about a series that I read, and that is the Henry Kimball and Lily Kentner series. I'm actually going to read a little bit from my phone about these books. So, this series, the first one in the series is The Kind Worth Killing. The second one is The Kind Worth Saving, and the third one is A Talent for Murder. So I read A Talent for Murder first because I'm just weird like that. A lot of times I don't read books in the order they're published. A Talent for Murder just came out this summer. It starts off with a woman named Martha, who is a librarian, and she's married to this guy who seems like he's a pretty nice guy, but she didn't really know him that well before they got married, and he still seems kind of mysterious to her. He's a salesman and he's away a lot. And one day he comes back from one of his trips, and when she's washing his clothes, she finds blood on his shirt. And so she ends up starting to investigate a little, and she discovers that every time her husband visits a city where he's, working for his salesman job, a woman in that city ends up being murdered. Now, of course, these are big cities where there's a lot of crime, so she's not really sure if he's really has anything to do with these murders or if it's just a coincidence, but she is starting to be suspicious. So she contacts her old friend, Lily Kentner. They were in graduate school together, and she tells Lily what's going on and asks Lily to help her. So Lily decides that she's going to follow the husband on one of these business trips, and she ends up discovering some pretty crazy things that I can't tell you about without spoiling the book. But it's a really good book. I liked the character of Martha. I really liked the character of Lily. Lily is basically a vigilante. She is a librarian vigilante, which is so cool. These are definitely not cozy books at all. Don't be fooled by the fact that they have librarians in them. These are fairly dark books, much darker than I usually read, but I really liked this book, A Talent for Murder, and it made me decide to go back and read the other two books in the series. So, the first book in this series is The Kind Worth Killing, and in this book, a man named Ted meets Lily. This is where we're introduced to her character when they're on a plane ride back to the United States. I think they've both been in London. And so he starts telling Lily about how his wife is cheating on him, and he sort of jokingly says that he'd like to kill her. And so Lily immediately says, "Well, I can help you with that." And so Ted and Lily start planning his wife's murder. And as I told you, these are some very dark books, but they're also really good. So Ted and Lily are trying to plan the wife's murder, but then things start to go wrong. They go very, very wrong. And so a detective named Henry Kimball ends up starting to investigate. And so this is how the series became named the Henry Kimball and Lily Kentner series. I don't think I even mentioned that Henry Kimball was a character in A Talent for Murder as well. To me, he's not that interesting of a character. I'm a lot more interested in Lily, but he is part of this series. So this book is about Henry trying to figure out what's going on and about Lily and Ted trying to plan this murder. It's really hard to tell you a lot about the plot without giving things away, but just know that it was very exciting and fast paced and fun to read about these characters. The last book I read in this series was actually the second book, The Kind Worth Saving. And in this book, we do find out more about the character of Henry Kimball. He's a detective now, but we find out that he was an English teacher many years ago. And so, in his new life as a detective, this woman hires him to investigate her husband because she thinks her husband is cheating on her. But it turns out that this woman was one of his students back when he was an English teacher. And they went through a tragedy together during that time that he was her teacher. So she hires him to look into her cheating husband. When he starts looking into it, he ends up finding two bodies. And so he starts trying to figure out what's happening. He ends up getting Lily to help him because they have this complicated relationship where sometimes they're at odds and sometimes they're working together. So I really enjoyed this whole series. The third book in the series, A Talent for Murder, was my favorite, but I liked all of these books. I hope that Peter Swanson will write more in this series. It's much darker than what I usually read, but they are all very exciting and fun books. Next, I want to talk about another series that I've been reading, and that is the Lila McLean Academic Mysteries. There are 5 books in this cozy mystery series. I've read the first 3. This is actually the second one that I'm showing you. So the first book is The Semester of Our Discontent. I read that one on my Kindle, and it is about a woman named Lila who has just gotten her PhD in English, and she starts teaching at Stonedale, which is a college in Colorado. She has an argument with her department head, and then shortly thereafter, she finds the department head dead. And so she's suspected in the murder, as well as some of her friends who are also suspected. So Lila starts trying to figure out who actually committed this murder. She finds out a lot of secrets about this college where she's working, including a secret society. There's a secret network of underground tunnels on the campus. So it's just a really fun book. The second one that I read was The Art of Vanishing, and I would have liked to get that one on my Kindle, but it turns out that these books are no longer available on Kindle. They were available on Kindle when I bought the first one, but when I went back to try to buy more, I found that none of them were on Kindle anymore. And so I had to buy them from Amazon. This one ended up, you can see it was a library copy that was sold used on Amazon. So it's been sort of a good thing and a bad thing actually buying physical copies of these books. I wanted to just read this series straight through, and I would have read it much faster, but I had to order the books from Amazon and wait for them to come in. So I didn't like having to wait. But it was also fun actually having physical books come in through Amazon. I haven't done that in a long time, since before I got my Kindle. So it was fun waiting on these books to come in and then getting my packages and getting to unwrap the book and open them. So The Art of Vanishing is Lila is still teaching at Stonedale, and a famous author is on campus for some kind of literary event that they're having on campus that Lila is helping with. So a lot of mysterious things happen. The author ends up vanishing and then reappearing. They have a display of some of his work that gets stolen, and all kinds of other mysterious things happen. Interestingly, there is not an actual murder in this book, which some people say made it not as good to them. I still enjoyed this book, The Art of Vanishing, and I went on to read the third book in the series, which is The Spirit in Question. And in that one, Lila is helping with a play that's being put on campus. And while they're working on this play, the director ends up being murdered, and they're suspected that there might be a ghost. It's in this old crumbling theater that the historical society in town doesn't want them to use. So there are all kind of fun things going on. So I've enjoyed that one too. Like I said, there are 2 more books in this series, and I'm really looking forward to reading them. I love books that are set on college campuses. I really like the character of Lila. She's a fun character to read about. So I'm very excited to continue with the Lila McLean Academic Mysteries. Next, I want to talk about another book by Cynthia Kuhn, and that is How to Book a Murder. In this book, a woman named Emma Stars has just returned to her hometown to help run her family bookstore, Starlit Books. And she is also planning literary events and parties for people. So her very first party that she plans is for a woman named Tabitha, who was Emma's high school bully. And so the party seems to be going well, but then Tabitha's husband, Tip, is murdered, and Emma is suspected of that murder. So she's trying to figure out who actually murdered Tip. Meanwhile, she gets hired to plan another literary event for an author named Calliope Nightfall. This event is Edgar Allan Poe themed, and so there are lots of fun things from Edgar Allan Poe's books, like ravens and a heart beating under the floorboards. It's just really fun to read about. This book would be great to read during the fall because it takes place around Halloween. There's a fun chapter where Emma is at a haunted house and some spooky things happen that are not actually part of the haunted house. Of course, the Edgar Allan Poe event is really fun. This is the first book in this new series. The second one comes out sometime this August, and I'm really excited to read that and to continue with this series. Next, I read Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. This is about a man named Ethan who is 40 years old, and he has just come back to his childhood home in a little subdivision called Hemlock Circle. And 30 years ago, Ethan had a really traumatic experience. He and his best friend Billy were camping out in Ethan's backyard. The next morning, Ethan woke up and found that there was a hole cut in the tent and Billy was gone. Billy was never seen again. No one knows what happened. Ethan doesn't remember anything from that night. All he knows is that he woke up to find Billy gone. So he's now back in Hemlock Circle 30 years later. When his friend disappeared, it was 1994. And so we get some chapters that are from 1994. I really enjoyed reading the nostalgic 90s stuff from that time period, like a discussion of the movie The Lion King and of pop culture and current events that were happening during that time. So when Ethan comes back 30 years later, things start happening that are related to what happened so long ago. Some new information comes up about Billy's disappearance. Some mysterious things start happening that make Ethan think, could Billy actually be here in the neighborhood, or is something supernatural going on? He just can't figure it out. So this was a really good, suspenseful book. My favorite part of it was the 90s nostalgia. It had a pretty surprising ending. If you know Riley Sager, you know a lot of times things just go crazy at the end of his books, and that can be a good or a bad thing. For me, the ending of this book was pretty good. I know some other booktubers disagree with that. So the only way you can decide is to read the book for yourself. So I definitely recommend The Middle of the Night. Next, I want to talk about The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. This is about a new resort called The Manor that's opening at this beautiful location on the coast of England. The manor is for very rich people. It's got an infinity pool. They can stay in these beautiful, luxurious cottages. They can go and get massages and have healing crystals. And so the book takes place during the opening weekend of the manor. But even though things seem great there at the resort, there's actually a lot of tension sizzling all around it. The local people in the village near the manor are not happy about it. It's built near an ancient forest, and they say that there are like spirits in the forest who don't like it. The manor used to be part of a public walking trail, but now the owner won't let the local people walk on it anymore. They're trying to take over a beach as a private beach for the manor and not let locals use it anymore. So the local people are not happy about the manor at all. So it's opening weekend, and we get some chapters that are set during this opening weekend, which is on midsummer. But we also get some chapters that happen after this opening weekend on the Sunday of it. And we know that there has been a fire, that someone from the manor is dead. We don't know yet who it is, so we're wondering about that throughout the book. We also get some chapters that are from 10 years ago and that have bearing on what's happening now at the manor. So it was a good book. It was not my favorite by Lucy Foley. I've liked some of her other books better, like The Hunting Party. But it was a good, solid read that kept me interested the whole time that I was reading it. It was fun because I was reading it on the summer solstice, and it takes place on the summer solstice. So you should definitely try it before the summer's over because it's a good summer book. The next book I want to talk about is Pitch Dark by Paul Doiron. This is the 15th book in the Mike Bowditch series. Mike Bowditch is a game warden in Maine, and in this book, he is investigating a man who lives in a very remote area of the Maine wilderness with his young daughter. The daughter is 12 years old, and Mike has heard that the daughter is almost never seen in public. She stays at this remote camp in the wilderness. She's homeschooled there. And so Mike hears some things that just make him kind of worried, and he wants to check in on this girl and make sure that she's okay, see what kind of man her father is, why he chooses to live this very isolated life. So Mike and his father-in-law, Charlie, get a pilot to fly them to this remote area because that's one of the only ways that you can get in. And so while they are there checking up on this man and his daughter, something pretty terrible happens that Mike and Charlie witness. Mike ends up having to go on a trek through the Maine wilderness trying to make it to Canada. He finds out some crazy secrets about the man and his daughter who are living here in the wilderness, and he is in a fight for his life and also a fight for the lives of other innocent people. So like all of the Mike Bowditch books, it has beautiful descriptions of nature. Nature is almost a character in the book, which is one of my favorite things about this series. This book is the 15th book in the series, but you could easily start with this book. But if you do, you would probably want to go back and read the other Mike Bowditch books because they're really good. Next, I want to talk about The Perils of Lady Catherine de Bourgh, which is the third book in the Mr. Darcy and Miss Tilney series by Claudia Gray. The Mr. Darcy in this book is Jonathan Darcy, who is the son of Fitzwilliam and Elizabeth Darcy from Pride and Prejudice. Miss Tilney is Juliet Tilney, the daughter of Henry and Catherine Tilney from Northanger Abbey. In this book, the two sleuths are summoned to Rosings Park by Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who you probably remember from Pride and Prejudice. Lady Catherine believes that someone is trying to murder her, and she wants Jonathan and Juliet to figure out who the murderer is and stop them. So the fun thing about this series is that it takes these characters that we know and love or hate from Jane Austen's books and puts them in these interesting situations where there's some kind of murder that's happened. Of course, Jonathan and Juliet are new characters, and they are both really great, fun characters to read about. They have a slow burn, very proper Regency era romance that's going on that you're wanting to find out what happens, wanting it to continue. So I really enjoyed this installment in this series, and I can't wait until Claudia Gray publishes some more books in the Mr. Darcy and Miss Tilney series. One book that I read and really enjoyed is The Wilds by Sarah Pearse. which is the third book in the Detective Elin Warner series. Sarah Pearse has actually said this is the last book in that series, so it wraps up Elin's story. So in this book, Elin is on what's supposed to be a vacation with her brother to a national park in Portugal. They're doing some hiking and they're staying in an RV park in this very rugged area. So while they're there, Elin's brother starts telling her about this woman who disappeared in the park. And her name was Kier. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And so the brother actually wants Elin to help him investigate what happened to Kier, which Elin is not totally happy about, but she does end up getting interested and invested in finding out what happened. So Kier is a drifter. She was involved with a man who was a chef who may or may not be a nice guy. There's some questions about him. Her brother is wondering what has happened to her, and the last place that she was known to be was in this national park. So Elin and her brother discover this camp of people living in the park who are very mysterious. They know that Kier lived with these people for a while, but they can't get the people to talk about her that much. So Elin's trying to figure out what happened. She also discovers that she has a more personal connection to Kier. So this book was very good and twisty. It had a lot of things in it that really took me by surprise. I didn't love the resolution of what Kier's connection was to this camp of people. It seemed a little unbelievable to me, but I did like this book overall. I felt like it was a good way of wrapping up Elin's story. And finally, this month, I reread two books in a series that you might be familiar with. It's this little known series called the Harry Potter series by somebody called J.K. Rowling. Have you ever heard of this before? Yeah, you probably have. I love the Harry Potter books, and sometimes I just get the urge to reread them, and who am I to fight that urge? So this summer, I reread The Prisoner of Azkaban, which is the third book in the series, and it's my favorite book out of all of them in the series, although I really love all of them. But in this book, Harry is, of course, returning to Hogwarts after the summer. He finds out that there's an escaped murderer named Sirius Black who is apparently looking for Harry and wants to kill him. And so Harry is trying to figure out who Sirius Black is, why he wants to kill him. Of course, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are going through their normal year at Hogwarts. They have all kinds of different things they have to learn this year, different types of creatures they have to fight. Dementors are introduced in this book. It's just a really good book, a really good addition to the series. We find out a lot about Harry's parents and about their friends when they were at Hogwarts, and I had a good time rereading it. After I finished it, I went ahead and read the fourth book in the series, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This is the book where Harry ends up competing in the Triwizard Tournament and has to face all kinds of obstacles. At the end of this book, we really reach a turning point in the series where the wizards have to decide whether or not they believe Voldemort is back and what side they're on. So I really enjoy both of these books. I've read them both before, but I enjoy them every time I read them. So I am done recapping all of the books that I read this summer. At the beginning of this video, I told you that I was going to talk about 13 books. And if you were counting, you may have realized that I actually talked about 14 books. I actually can count. I had just forgotten about one of these books until I started talking and looking back at my Goodreads profile. So I'm glad that I was able to talk about all 14 of the books that I read in the middle of June through the end of July. I hope this gives you some ideas for things that you might enjoy reading. Please comment about any of these books that you've read and what you thought about them, or any other books that you've read this summer that you've enjoyed. As always, if you liked this video and you want to see more book recommendations and reviews, please subscribe to my channel. Now, go back to school shopping while I read.